Why wait to see if you'll get something you like this Valentine's Day when you can go to BlueNile.com and find something you'll love? Whether you're looking to treat yourself to a little winter sparkle or show a galentine how much you appreciate them, Blue Nile offers a wide selection of high-quality designs, expert guidance, and free 30-day returns for the ultimate peace of mind. You can even design your own jewelry. Right now, save up to 50% at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMP, IRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And for you gold members, if you want to become a member, you can go to the Empire Media page, hit join, find your membership tier. Or for you gold members, as soon as we get all this coaching stuff squared away, and I know when the presser is and all that, and I think it'll be Thursday, but nothing's official. But as soon as we get that all squared away, then I want to do another private Zoom for you gold members that will then be available to the other members afterwards. So anyway, stay tuned for that. As soon as we know more about the staff, we'll do that. In a minute, oh, by the way, don't forget you can read my work on ESPN.com. And in a couple of minutes, I'll be joined by my ESPN colleague in Chicago, Courtney Cronin, because I wanted to go over the odds of the Bears looking into trading that first pick. Would they really look into it? What she thinks they're going to do with that first pick. And there may not be a big surprise there, but I think she does a good job of laying out possibilities and what it might take if the Commanders wanted to move up, what it might take to go from 2 to 1 and why the Bears might entertain such an offer. But she has all that insight in a minute. I also ask her about Montez Sweat and the impact he made in Chicago. So stay tuned for that in a minute, but just one little couple quick coaching updates. They're almost done filling out their staff as I speak. The only positions that really remain are running back and defensive line. Ken Norton, I think Ken Norton Jr. will be the linebackers coach. Ryan Kerrigan will assist him. Bobby Ingram is going to stay as the receivers coach. Not a big shocker there, to be honest, because I think he did a pretty good job with this group. I think the group overall liked him. So I think, he's an experienced guy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So not a big surprise. I think it takes a lot to stick around on another staff. And so again, and Sharif Floyd will be an assistant defensive line coach. So all we're waiting to know as the time I tape this is D-line and then running backs. And Jennifer King is not going to be someone who they're going to elevate to that spot. So it will be somebody from outside. So we'll see where that goes, but we should know. Maybe by tomorrow, we should know the full staff, but or could know the full staff. I shouldn't say should because I don't know that for sure. Anyway, so that's what we know with the group. There's not a whole lot more to add on that. I'm going to have more information on their coaching staff in general and talk based on what I gathered about some of these coaches from people. Just a few of the highlights that I've gathered from talking to some people about some of these coaches, some of the key ones, especially Ken Norton, I think it could be a good addition, et cetera. And so we'll get to that at another time. But today I just really want to stick with the quarterbacks because it is such a big deal. And I know some people might get quarterbacked out for a little bit, and I'm not going to just talk about quarterbacks, but I do think right now, coming off the Super Bowl, and right now there's a lot of talk about what Chicago might do. And we are very much in the early stages of this quarterback evaluation process. So I think a big thing for me to do is explore what the Bears might do in terms of trading that pick, or would they trade that pick? And I think for Washington's sake, I don't think, it's going to be a while before I think they settle on somebody for sure at that number 2 pick. And I don't think you're going to be hearing a lot of leaks about who it might be, because I think they're going to keep that close to the vest. And I think we can see based on their coach search how they're going to operate with this. And this would be for a guy in this first time as a GM, it's a pretty big pick. I mean, it's a really big pick for a guy in his first year as a GM. So I think they're going to be very careful. And if you hear that they've settled on somebody, I would push back on that, because I don't think that it's possible at this point that they would be at that point. So, and I don't know that anybody's really saying that now, but I think it's going to take a little bit for them to get to a certain point where they say this for sure is a guy, again, based on the coach search. Unless there's a guy that's just one of those quarterbacks just jumps way out above for them, I would expect them to go through the process for a while. And again, one of the things you learn that have learned about them throughout the coach search is how hard they worked to keep an open mind and let the process play out. That's why I push back again on anybody who says that Ben Johnson was way out front of anything. He never was. Was he a top candidate? Yes. It's really hard to say that. And I think it's based on the fact that like these guys kept an open mind throughout the process. They weren't going to fall in or out of love with anybody. They wanted it to play out and examine the strengths and weaknesses. I think they're going to do the same thing with quarterback. So whatever decision they make, it's not going to be a rash one. It's not going to be, Kingsbury saying, give me this guy. It's going to be something that, there will be there will be enough input, but I think it's ultimately, you look at Adam Peters will be the guy making the call with the input of others to make sure they're all on that quote unquote same page. Anyways, but that's why I want to bring Courtney on now, because I think it's good to have this discussion now. So let's get to my conversation with ESPN Bears reporter, Courtney Cronin. Courtney, I'm sure you haven't gotten this question yet before, but what are the Bears going to do at the number 1 pick? Do you think they know already?
I think they have an idea. And this is before meeting with Caleb Williams, before meeting with Drake May at the Combine is when, all of that kicks off. And then, of course, they have their pro day circuit. They're in draft meetings right now. They're setting their board, at least the initial board. I think they have an idea, at least of the strengths of this quarterback class, but also the opportunity that's in front of them. That with this number 1 overall pick, the way that the team finished last year and the opportunity that's ahead of them, I don't think you can pass up on that opportunity in back-to-back years, knowing that the offensive rookie of the year in CJ Stroud was someone they could have had last year. Right. They chose not to. They stuck with Justin Fields. As much as Justin Fields is beloved in Chicago, beloved by his teammates, all of those things are true. I still think that this is an opportunity that league-wide, everybody seems to have the idea that the Bears are going to do, quote unquote, the obvious thing, which is to draft a quarterback. I think at this point of the offseason, you're probably painting that scenario if you are Ryan Poles and your staff and seeing, okay, I can understand why this would work. There's nothing definitive yet, but I do think that they have at least some clue of the direction they want to go in this offseason.
Do you think for sure it would be Caleb Williams? Because every once in a while, someone's going to pop up and say, well, this is my top quarterback is Jaden Daniels or Drake May. I mean, is it for sure? Most people I talk to say Caleb Williams is the best quarterback in this class. But is it for sure Caleb at that point?
I'm still in I'm holding out my reservations on that. Because, yeah, I've seen everything for where people are like, he's a can't miss prospect. Could develop into Patrick Mahomes, which I think is putting cart before the horse, because the Bears had an opportunity to draft Mahomes. I don't know if he would be Patrick Mahomes of, dynasty lore if he was in Chicago, if he came here in 2017. I don't know if Caleb Williams will develop into that. But you see everything from that to, oh, he's a QB2 at best. And, he's not a generational talent. I know what the draft analysts and the experts are saying, that Caleb Williams is probably who the Bears draft at number 1. But we've seen draft boards change over time as people start talking to these prospects. And, from combine all the way to the draft, you tend to see some movement. And even last year with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, there was that jockeying of positioning back and forth till the very end. And then it ends up being Bryce and then CJ. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens with the way that the quarterback class is currently laid out, at least in theory, of 1, 2, and 3, Williams, May, and Daniels. But I think that Caleb Williams, and what we know and all the investment that the Bears and every other team that's in the market for a quarterback has done, that he's probably the consensus as of right now to go to Chicago if they do use that number 1 overall pick.
What did the hire of Shane Waldron as OC and not Cliff Kingsbury, what did that tell you, if anything?
I think that they used that interview with Cliff to get information on Caleb Williams, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. The Shane Waldron hire, coming from that Shanahan-McVay system, shows that no matter who the quarterback is, he can work with a lot of different prospects, whether it's somebody like Justin Fields, whether it's somebody that is currently or, a draft eligible quarterback, and turn that guy into a success. I mean, it was from Jared Goff to Russell Wilson to Geno Smith. He's shown he can work with different body types, different skill sets, and fit those guys into this West Coast offense. So to me, it's like they did less specializing. Like if you're going to take a look at Cliff Kingsbury and say, okay, well, the natural tie there to Caleb Williams, all the things that Caleb Williams did in his junior season when Cliff was his QB coach and the offensive analyst at USC, I think you widen the ability to get the most out of whoever the quarterback's going to be by getting somebody who isn't just tied to one guy, if that makes sense. That's how I view Shane Waldron, because if you take a look at the 9 candidates that they interviewed for that offensive coordinator opening, most of them came from that Shanahan, McVay, Kubiak system. That's a quarterback-friendly offense. It's what we just saw with Brock Purdy and his rise over the last 2 seasons. And so you don't have to necessarily get the scheme-transcendent quarterback, because so often those guys, they don't grow on trees. So often they don't actually develop in the NFL. Like it's such a rarity that you can get a Patrick Mahomes, a Tom Brady, somebody who can be in any system and succeed. So getting the coach who can take, guys from different sorts of, areas of quarterbacking and fit them into a system, and also keeping this offense similar so the 10 other guys on offense don't have to learn a brand new language. I think that was a priority for them as well as they went through the OC process.
You hear the words historic haul. That's what it would take to get the Bears out of that pick. What do you think that, first of all, how many teams do you think would try to trade up? And also, what would that historic haul look like for them, do you think?
So based on last year, 4 picks and DJ Moore, who I think you could basically say was the equivalent of a first round pick. If they're looking for, and I've heard everything from, it's going to take crazy compensation, historic haul. They could get even, twice of what they got from the Panthers last year. I think it's multiple first round picks, maybe 3. So if you take a look at the Trey Lance trade, if you're using that kind of as the barometer for what San Francisco did in 2021, multiple first round picks, I think mortgaging the future of a franchise is probably the best way to put it if you're going to move up to get to number 1. And how many teams are actually in the position to do that? Washington, of course, being at number 2. The New England Patriots need a quarterback at number 3. Those are the only 2 teams that feel like the most realistic options to get up to number 1, teams that actually have the draft capital to get up to number 1. And, Washington, as you know, with the extra picks that they got at the trade deadline for Montez Sweat and Chase Young, they seem like they're in a prime position to do that. But that's where it starts. You got to take a look at teams what the compensation probably is, and then what teams can actually afford to do that. A team like the Minnesota Vikings need a quarterback. Yeah. If it's not going to be Kirk Cousins again, can they move up from where they are at in the draft? Could the Raiders move up from 13? I feel like that's way too much for these teams, especially the situation that they're in, to go and say, all right, well, to hell with the rest of the future of this team. We're going all in this year to get this quarterback to then build out for the future. That's a really risky gamble and a proposition. I think that it's just out of the price range for the majority of quarterback needy teams outside of the top 3.
And do you think they would I guess it depends on who the Bears like at quarterback. If they feel like May or Daniels is close to Williams, maybe they'd be willing to trade to number 2, but you think it would take that much even to move one spot back?
I think it would take a lot. And that's the other part of this equation that I remember asking Ryan Poles about at his season-ending press conference. Can you still get a first-round quarterback if you don't take one at number 1? The answer is yes, because this is a class, unlike last year's, that has talent throughout the first round and then into the second round. So you can go all the way from Caleb Williams to a JJ McCarthy, who might be an early day 2 pick, and still get a quarterback in this year's draft class. And that may change how they approach the Justin Fields thing. Do they keep him? Do they trade him? If you're getting somebody on day 2, you're keeping Justin Fields this year. Granted, that makes things kind of convoluted with the 5th-year option and, all of those things. But it's not out of the question for the Bears to take the number 1 overall pick, to trade it, and maybe still get a Jaden Daniels out of this draft. Still get a Drake May if they move back one spot, but then you also have to factor in, let's say Washington. If they move back to number 2, you have an opportunity, probably your only opportunity, to get Marvin Harrison Jr. So how you approach, like, everything starts and ends with like what they're doing at quarterback, but how you approach the rest of the draft, if you move out of that number 1 overall pick, is based on how far you think realistically you can move down in the first round to either get another quarterback or get the top skill player that you expect to, be a main contributor next year.
So, but even just to go from 2 to 1, multiple first round picks, most likely.
I think so. Okay. I think that this will take, because of the draft class and because of how these quarterbacks are being positioned, I think it will end up being significantly more draft capital that comes Chicago's way, if it's Washington, if it's the Patriots, hell, even if it's Arizona, moving up to number 1 to go get a quarterback.
What kind of market do you think Justin will have? And I know, like, everybody's going to set a high asking price now because why not, right? But what do you think the realistic market value for him is in terms of trades?
Well, Jeremy Fowler and I did a story going into week 18 where we polled league executives on a number of different topics with Fields, as it pertains to the trade value, what the market's going to be. Is he an instant starter somewhere else? Like, what teams would be interested? And at that point, it was 2nd round pick, 3rd round pick for Fields, maybe a combination of a couple things, a 2nd and a 4th, all, the opportunities, you couldn't pin people down to say, oh, he's this, like, dead set on him being a 1st round pick, a 2nd round, like, worth a 1st round pick, a 2nd round pick, whatever it is. But you start hearing different things now. Adam Schefter was on Waddle and Sylvie on ESPN 1000 last week, and he said that he felt the Bears could definitely get a 1st round pick for Justin Fields. So clearly that's being put out there in the league right now, and maybe that's trying to drive the price up on Justin. But you got to think about the teams that would be best suited to trade for a quarterback who could either be their future or a bridge quarterback, because you're probably trading and giving him a contract extension at some point in the very near future. You've got to be willing to do that. You got to be willing to pick up the 5th-year option and then decide, is this guy going to be worth, $40-50 million a year? What are the teams that are in that position? We're hearing Pittsburgh. We're hearing Atlanta. The Raiders felt like an option before Luke Getsy became the offensive coordinator there. I do not believe that there would end up being another pairing between those two, but there's, the market for Justin Fields is going to be a very interesting one that I think we'll start to get a little bit more clarity on at the combine, when you start hearing things. And of course, free agency is about 2 weeks after things wrap up in Indianapolis. So that'll be very intriguing to see if all of a sudden the 2nd round pick that Jeremy and I had been hearing was probably on the table for Justin Fields, if that ends up becoming more in the coming weeks.
And like you said, you guys wrote that story back then. For people listening, you can go back and still read it about what the Bears thought of Justin and his progression. Has he progressed enough in your mind that he can still be a good starter in this league and worth a shot?
There's always a team that thinks that they could fix a quarterback. And if you take a look at, like, Pittsburgh, for example, so they just hired Arthur Smith as their offensive coordinator. He's an under center guy, and Justin operated primarily in the shotgun with the Chicago Bears the last couple of years. Do they feel that that would be a fit? Maybe. I think that Justin still has, some of his best days ahead of him if he gets into the right offense. This clearly, like, the issue with Chicago the last couple of years was such a stop-start process where couple weeks it felt like the quarterback's making strides, play calling's catching up to where Justin is. Okay, then maybe the play calling looks like it's better, and then just like, it was just, they were never on the same page. So if you get him in the right offense, can you recapture some of that magic that made him such a great prospect coming out of college at Ohio State, but also fix some of the issues within his game that have been prevalent throughout his first 3 years, 38 starts as an NFL quarterback? The time to throw, the seeing downfield, the ability to process information. Like, is that going to go away when he gets into another system? We'll see, but he's too young to give up on right now. I am a firm believer in that. This is not a comparable experience to the Mitchell Trubisky situation in Chicago, where after the 2021 season, they just parted ways and let him go off and try to, resurrect his career somewhere else. Justin Fields is a much more appealing commodity for a team right now to take a chance on if he gets in our system, we can make him flourish in ways that Chicago did not.
How upset would they be if they went back to Carolina? And listen, I'm not a big like, oh, he's from this school, so therefore you can't take him, because under that scenario, Houston doesn't take CJ Stroud. But for the Bears, Mitch Trubisky, failed experiment. If they somehow don't take Caleb Williams and end up with Drake May after passing up on guys like Mahomes, and I'm guessing that wouldn't go over too well.
And that's the baseline of all of this. Can you afford to do it in back-to-back years? The answer is no. Jobs are on the line at that point. People get fired if they make these decisions where you have the offensive rookie of the year in Houston right now, a guy that you could have had. If that somehow happened again, can you imagine? Like they would have to clean house with people making decisions, a coaching staff that already kind of feels, at least with Matt Eberflus, you have 10 wins in 2 years. They say they're staying the course, but undoubtedly he's going to be entering that hot seat territory in 2024. You got to start producing on the field. And if you pass up on a quarterback that helps you get there, of any franchise that knows what it's like to have a team that's really, really good, even great in other places. Of course, we think back to 2018 when they made that trade for Khalil Mack. They had an awesome defense. The quarterback play is kind of what held them back. They can't afford to repeat that cycle. So if it's Caleb Williams and there's questions about, does he want to come to Chicago, or is any of this just like fodder that's out there that was not put out by him, that's, meant to, drive him somewhere else? So you got to be able and be smart enough and have enough research done to bypass those things that may lead you off of the path of the best quarterback you can possibly take, because above all else, you have to get that position right. This team has never developed a franchise quarterback in the modern era of the NFL, one that they drafted. That has to change, because the futility of the position in Chicago is just, it's going on decades at this point. And if you don't get that right with the opportunity that you have now, with the cap space and free agency, with the number 1 overall pick, first team in the common era to get the number 1 overall pick the year after trading it, like it's like the yellow brick road. Like you cannot get off this path without shooting yourself in the foot and setting the franchise back even further.
I am familiar with the quest for a quarterback that lasts that long. Last thing, Montez Sweat. Do you think he surprised people there? How impactful was he? And just what were your thoughts on him?
Definitely, like in terms of surprise, to see one player come in and make that big of an impact that quickly for a defense at that point, which was going through a massive period of transition. That was week 9. So Matt Eberflus had been calling plays for 7-ish weeks. They had no pass rush. They couldn't generate consistent pressure on the quarterback. To watch one player come in and change the trajectory of that defense, what it did for the guys in the back end, they finished tied with San Francisco for the most interceptions in the league after like having so few through the first half, for the first half of the season. That will go down as one of the better moves from the 2023 season made by any GM and any team. And I'm not surprised that right away they get that contract extension linked up within 6 days of him being in Chicago. You don't make that trade unless you have the idea that you're going to be able to do that. And what they do now to help Montez Sweat, so it's not all going to be on him. They've got the 9th overall pick as well. Is that Dallas Turner from Alabama, another edge rusher they could get in the draft? Do they go after Danielle Hunter? This team is still in need of several pieces defensively, starting up front. And they've got the money to do it. So it'll be a very intriguing part of the offseason to see how they spend their dollars and how much they dedicate to getting more help up front. Because once you see the impact that a disruptive edge rusher like Montez Sweat can have, I don't think we've ever seen a player finish a season leading 2 teams in sacks. It's pretty wild.
Well, I think you can see the impact by what happened after he left here as well.
Yeah.
Because he was pretty good last year and pretty good he'll be pretty good going forward, because that's just kind of who he is. So, Courtney, appreciate your time. Great insight. You're the best. Thank you.
Of course. Anytime.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Courtney for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. I'll be back on Thursday with another episode. So I'll talk to you next time.